First of all, can I pick your brain on this reorganisation of Downing Street that we had further announcements about last night? Stephen Barclay, the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster and Cabinet Office Minister, is now going to be Chief of Staff. How's that going to work?
I'm not very sure how that's going to work because a member of Parliament has either got to be a government minister or not a member of Parliament if they're going to work within Downing Street. You can be a parliamentary private secretary, but that just means turning up in Downing Street and supporting the Prime Minister. So it's not at all clear to me. I assume he's taking on a ministerial role as Chief of Staff of this new department. It's a rather funny title because I would normally expect a Chief of Staff to be a civil servant.
And what about the logic behind it, that it might strengthen the Prime Minister's and 10 Downing Street's relationship with backbenchers? Of course, in the past, we've had people like Gavin Barwell, a former MP, become, when he left Parliament, Theresa May's Chief of Staff. For that exact reason, do you think there is a utility in having Steve Barclay in that role?
There may be some utility, but the question is, too little, too late. The Prime Minister's problem is not about the organisation of Downing Street. The Prime Minister's problem is that he isn't fit for office. He isn't fit for office because he tells lies, because he doesn't follow rules, and because it's quite clear that Downing Street is chaotic, because the leadership he provides is chaotic. Indeed, he's almost said deliberately chaotic, because this is one of his methods of governance. And it's everybody else who pays the price for this. So I don't really see why anything's going to change by appointing new people in Downing Street, because the evidence is overwhelming that he's done this before when he got rid of Mr. Cummings, and it didn't really make any difference. The chaos continued.
And one thing, of course, which could really change the situation is if the Met Police come back and say they are going to fine some people for breaking COVID regulations. One of those people might be the Prime Minister. A senior cabinet source telling the Sunday Times this morning that the Prime Minister would have to resign in that instance if he was given a fixed penalty notice. Do you agree with that logic? And also, what are your thoughts on the timing of the Met Police? They're only handing out fines here, but we're entering the second week of them looking into this. Should they not have come back by now?
I have no idea how long the Metropolitan Police are going to take. I rather agree with you that I would have thought that it shouldn't have to take very long. But the issue about his resigning when he gets handed, if he gets handed a fixed penalty notice, yes, I suspect 99.9% of the public might at that point say this enough is enough. But the remarkable thing with this Prime Minister is he never says enough is enough. He just carries on. And I have to say, I think he's only going to go when his hands are prized off the door knob of Downing Street. And that requires Conservative members of Parliament to have the courage to do their duty, which is to see that they have a Prime Minister who isn't fit for office and remove him. Because when the fixed penalty notice has come, it still won't prevent him, as a matter of law, staying as Prime Minister if he insists on doing so. And his behaviour is such that I strongly suspect that's exactly what he might try and do.
And yet it is the case, as we had some polling a couple of days ago in the Times, in fact it might have been yesterday actually, that 2/3 of the Conservative Party membership don't think he should resign at the moment. And you've still got, as Nadine Dorries was telling us yesterday, a large chunk of the Conservative Parliamentary Party who are seemingly happy keeping him in position.
2/3 of the Conservative Parliamentary Party, the Conservative Party membership, makes up about 0.001% of the population. So I'm not sure that that's a very good indication of whether the Prime Minister should remain or resign. The Parliamentary Party is the group that has the duty to decide whether the governance of the country and the public interest can tolerate a Prime Minister who is a serial liar and at the same time is conducting chaotic government with real consequences well outside of Westminster. In our international relations, he's just not trusted. They've got to decide whether they're going to do this. And the risk to them, and particularly to cabinet ministers who decide to hold fire, and I do appreciate how difficult it is on this, is that if they tolerate this for too long, they will become sullied with the Prime Minister's extraordinary personal behaviour. And that's not a good thing either. And I suspect they'll then find it much harder, should one of them become Prime Minister, to get the trust back of the public, which they're currently losing.
You, of course, are sort of comparatively on the left, on the sort of centre of the Conservative Party in your views and opinions. I wonder what you make of the runners and riders for who might take over from Boris Johnson. As I mentioned, there are at least 3 cabinet ministers who the Sunday Times reports want Rishi Sunak sacked for his perceived disloyalty over the past few days. Are you someone who looks at Rishi Sunak and thinks that's a Conservative Party I can get on board with?
I think there are a number of options within the cabinet and outside the cabinet who might make a very good leader of the Conservative Party. And frankly, any of them would be a better leader of the Conservative Party than Mr. Johnson and a better prime minister. So the question, I'm quite happy to leave this question to my parliamentary colleagues. And I don't think I have a favourite. What I do think is that the longer the cabinet continues to tolerate Mr. Johnson and not to take action because they are in a position to get rid of him, then the more they will be tarnished by his behaviour. So I do think that if this goes on for longer and longer, it becomes more likely that the person who is going to emerge at the end of it will not be a cabinet minister.
Thanks very much for your time this morning. Former Attorney General Dominic Grieve.